Afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships at Arizona State University and Director of the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. And I am the point of contact for the Killam Fellowship at ASU, which is our topic of discussion today. So, what to expect from today's conversation? We are obviously going to cover the basics of eligibility, the mission of Killam. I'll take a look at the selection criteria so you can start thinking strategically. Make sure you understand the application timeline so you understand how to start plotting your labor in the next few weeks. Guidance on selecting a Canadian university. This is actually a pretty big component of the application strategy, and my assumption is that most of us are not terribly familiar with Canadian higher education. So some tips and tricks as far as that goes. And just we'll talk some general application strategy. We'll look at a couple of our previous applicants to get a sense of how they approach this. And yeah, hopefully get you off to a great start. If you're not used to this concept, if this is the first time interacting with me or with the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, that phrase national scholarship or fellowship may be new to you. The important distinction to remember is that when we're talking about national scholarships or fellowships, we're not talking about ASU scholarships, we're not talking about merit awards or need awards or anything like that. These are awards that are available to a wide range of students nationwide, sometimes even internationally. They tend to be sponsored by government agencies or major nonprofit groups or philanthropic organizations. And so they have a very large applicant pool. And because they have very large applicant pools, they have very low selection rates. And because of that, they tend to have a lot of prestige, right? Anytime we get something that's difficult to get, it makes other people go, oh, well, this person must really have something there. Um, and that is one of the values of these major awards. It's something you can put on your resume to say, look, I put a lot of work into this. This organization thought I was pretty great. And more importantly, I think the difference is with these scholarships and fellowships is that there's a huge experiential component to them. So not only did I win this award, not only did this group of people think I was great, but I also went and had this life-changing experience and I learned a ton from it. And I'm a far more competent person than I was going in. So that's why the office exists, is to help you all win these type of awards, identify these type of awards, but more importantly, we exist to help you write your best possible application, right? The outcome is not always up to us. There are a lot of variables in there. There are a lot of humans involved. There's a lot of subjectivity. We can't control if there's a government shutdown. We can't control if there's a global pandemic, right? And so our thing we can control is how well you write this application. And that's what our promise is to you. And so, we have webinars like this. We have writing workshops all the time. If you enter into this process, you'll do a lot of one-on-one interaction with me where you'll get individual counseling, writing instruction, and Killam doesn't have an interview component to it, but if you were to apply to a different award that does have an interview round, we'd be happy to coach you with that as well. We organize the campus committee that selects the nominees, and so you don't have to impress me. I'm not the one who chooses. I'm here to facilitate your application process and to make sure our committee is able to make a good choice. And yeah, I make sure everybody's well supported all throughout the process. So today we're focused specifically on Killam, which is a program of Fulbright Canada. So you might have heard Fulbright before. It's a huge award for ASU, or one of the top producing schools in the country for that. And if you've ever been to Honors Hall, if you go down that first floor, you'll notice the Wall of Fame, as students like to call it. And that whole wall is almost entirely Fulbright recipients. Well, that is the big Fulbright. That's the Fulbright U.S. student program, meaning the major exchange award that the Department of State funds to facilitate exchange all throughout the world. Each country has its own Fulbright Commission because it's a multilateral program. And so Canada's Fulbright Commission, in and above the U.S. student program, has some of its own programs too. One of those programs is Killam. And it was established essentially to facilitate exchanges between U.S. and Canadian universities. So basically, what it provides is full-time enrollment at a Canadian university. So if you're selected for this, you'll get to participate in that program, and you'll pay your home tuition, and you'll go and attend school there for 1 or perhaps 2 semesters. There's a ton of other assets that go along with that. We'll talk about some of the other funding opportunities you get with it, the award stipend, but also leadership development and ambassadorial programming as well. So it's a whole experience, right? The cool thing about Killam is that conversely, we have Canadian students, Canadian undergraduates who are coming to the US. And because ASU is a partner program with Killam, we welcome every year a couple of Canadian undergrads, just as we're sending a couple of our own undergrads abroad. So it is truly an exchange program, one for one. In terms of benefits, as I mentioned, in addition to whatever merit award you're receiving already, you'll pay your home tuition. You are a direct exchange student, so essentially you're just paying for your ASU credit hours as you normally would and using whatever aid you have in place. In addition to that, you would get a $6,000 stipend from Killam. They would help take care of your fees for Canadian healthcare access. And then there are orientation programming at the beginning in Ottawa and then a 3-day seminar in DC. And so, again, that exchange aspect and getting to travel to both nations' capitals. There is additional money available if you want to organize some travel within Canada. So, if you don't want to just stay in the one location to which you're assigned, you have this plan for travel throughout the country. They will provide some extra funds for that. There is opportunity after you've done your Killam to return to Canada for an internship or remain in Canada for an internship. And they do have opportunities for additional grants if you wanted to design and execute a community action initiative, right? And throughout this, you're also getting mentoring from folks in the program as well as program alumni. So it ends up being a really great network, a really great career and professional development. So obviously, this is open to U.S. citizens only because this is a U.S. Canadian exchange. If you happen to be another citizenship, if you're Canadian, I suppose you could apply. If you're currently in the US, I don't know how that would work. Hasn't happened yet. Full-time undergraduate with some study remaining, meaning that once you've gone and done your Killam, you'll return and do some coursework here. So depending on what your date of graduation is, that you would need to have at least a term remaining following your Killam period. And you can choose when you do your Killam period, whether that would be next fall, next spring, or even both semesters, right? Obviously, English fluency, and if you choose a francophone part of Canada or a francophone university, you would need French proficiency, and that is an option. If you speak competent French, you could enroll in full French immersion, perfectly legit. And then they say a superior and competitive academic record. In practice, it's generally meant 3.7-ish and up. They just want to know that you're a strong enough student, a dedicated enough student where you'll be able to handle this transition into a different educational system, for one term and back, right? If you're a little bit of a slow starter or maybe a little shaky academically, probably wouldn't be a great experience for you. Application itself is pretty straightforward. So it includes an application form, which includes 3 separate sets of course selections. So you'll identify a first, second, and third choice in terms of universities, and for each one, you'll identify potential courses that you would take there, right? And we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. It has a one-page personal statement, which we'll unpack. CV, what we would like to call a resume, typically of up to 3 pages, 2 reference letters, and then your transcripts and proof of citizenship. Now, as I mentioned, this is a direct exchange program. We are a partnering institution. We have agreed to host Killam Fellows here, which means that our applicants get, shall we say, more favorable treatment by the National Committee. They essentially look at our applications before they look at the general pool. We can nominate up to 6 semesters worth of applicants per year. So that would mean typically people apply for a 1 semester experience. So we can nominate up to 6 students. If we were to nominate a student who wanted to do a full year, that would count as 2 people, right? Or 2 nominations, right? Overall, they select 15 to 20 per year. And so on an average year, I haven't crunched the numbers, but my back of the napkin and math would show that we average probably 2 to 3 recipients per year, right? Typical year, would be 2. We've had more than that, right? So we have a pretty good chunk of the national pool every year. We've been a really strong participant in this program historically. They love to see our applications. You all always do a wonderful job. And yeah, it's just been a historic connection. And so I really would love to see it going. They make their determinations based on the rationale for program of study as their top criteria, right? So that's the first thing they're considering. Have you offered a good rationale for why you want to be in Canada for a term? and where do you want to study and why do you want to study there, right? And we'll talk more about that in a moment. That is presented partially in the personal statement, which also tells us a little bit about your background and your future goals, makes the case for you as an applicant. And in general, your background in terms of your academic achievement, research experience, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the reference letters. Our timeline, you would need to complete an intake meeting by December 5th. If you're at this presentation right now on October 16, 2025, I'm guessing that you'll be well ahead of that. Some of you have already scheduled meetings with me. Fantastic. I would get this done sooner rather than later because then that gives you more time to get going. Basically, it's an opportunity for me to do a viability check, make sure that you're eligible to apply, answer whatever questions you have, and get you going, right? And then you have all of that time. Our actual nomination deadline isn't until January, right? We just don't want anyone starting an application over the Chris or the winter break or trying to come to us January 1 and saying, "Oh, I'd love to apply." The semester starts like right there, and so there really wouldn't be a lot of time, and also there isn't a lot of time, not as much time as you think to work over the break, right? And so we would love to get you started now, getting you drafting now, so you can be decelerating towards that deadline. We will do our review. Essentially, Killam will collect applications, give them to us, and say, here are the students who have applied from your university. Which of these would you care to endorse? And then you'll know in March whether or not you'll be going to Canada the following year. So, in terms of actual timeline, yeah, now is the time to get your intake done, get started on your essay drafts. By mid-November, certainly before Thanksgiving, I would have asked for letters of recommendation. That on the calendar is quite a ways away, right? But then you think we've got Thanksgiving coming in there, and then just a couple of weeks before the end of the term, which ends on December 5th. Then we have finals, and then everyone starts to scatter. It's very difficult to get letters of recommendation out of faculty members over a break, right? Um, Part of the process, excuse me, you'll also need to meet with the Global Education Office, with our program manager for Canada there. And you'll also need to coordinate with your primary academic advisor to ensure that the courses you'd like to take would actually satisfy degree plan requirements for your degree. So you've got essentially three different folks you're going to have to work with through this process: myself, Geo, and of course, your academic advisor. So all the way into December and into January, you can continue revising and editing. Happy to give you feedback all throughout that process. So um, where can you go? Well, just about any of the major universities in Canada. And so I've organized them roughly geographically from actually opposite geographically. As you can see, Ontario, of course, is the most populous province in Canada, where the majority of the universities are. But if you know anything about Canadian geography, you'll see, population sort of concentrated on the coast, right? There are options available, of course, in Ontario, which, as I said, is the most populous province. Quebec, which is going to be more of a French-speaking province. But you've got universities in Newfoundland and Labrador, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, which are all fairly small, but what they call the maritime provinces. Looking to the west coast, British Columbia, Alberta. In British Columbia, if you look pretty much down in the southwest, you've got Vancouver and Victoria, which are beautiful, very opposite of Arizona type places. And so, as we think, not all of the provinces are represented, right? So we've got the maritime provinces in the left-hand column there. We've got the central, very populous provinces, Quebec and Ontario, but then just Alberta and British Columbia. And so your more rural provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, of course, Nunavut, there's no major universities there, right? These are very rural places. Keeping that geography in mind as we start to think about program selection, right? It matters a lot, right? So one of the things I encourage people to do is widen your aperture a little bit, take into consideration undersubscribed programs, right? If you ask an American to name a Canadian city, more likely than not, they're going to say Toronto, right? And not for nothing, 1 out of 5 Canadians lives in Toronto. It's a big, big city. But there are many other areas of Canada each with their own culture, each with their own history, each with their own ecosystems and climates. And so really be thinking about where would I like to go vis-a-vis my interests? Where can I make the best case? Um, you want to take a look at the placements for the last 3 years. If you go on the Killam website, kind of see where have people primarily been going. I'm not saying there's a quota, but if they get 300 applications and 100 of them put Toronto as a first choice, you've kind of put yourself in a difficult situation. Unless, of course, that is the best choice. You can make the strongest argument for Toronto. But so if there are great fits, we had a vocal performance major that actually applied and got into PEI because there was a great program there. We had somebody who was into sustainable architect agriculture and food pathway systems that was ended up. I think she went to PEI as well, or New Brunswick, right, where there was a really strong connection between the local sustainable farming systems and the university researchers, right? And so, obviously, if I was a marine biologist, I'd probably want to go to Victoria. And so, really keeping that in mind. If you're political science, government, foreign affairs, Ottawa, right? You're going to want to be around the capital. So, just like you would want to be around Washington, D.C. Toronto, as I mentioned, University of Toronto, UT, and McGill University, which is a private research university in Montreal, are the most popular choices. Mainly because they are probably the best known and globally the highest rated. Canada doesn't really have a hierarchical system the way that we do. Americans really like to rank things. We have a whole magazine that does basically exist just because it ranks universities, right? All the universities are quite good, or at least equally distributed in Canada. And so there's not as if like, oh, that's a great one or that's a weak one. There's not that fervor over the admissions race in Canada like there is here. Toronto and McGill are perhaps the most well endowed in terms of research resources, right? And so they draw top shelf faculty and have the best funding for research expenditures and things like that. But it's not because the Canadian government or anyone has determined that these will be the best two schools. So, as I said, you're going to pick three choices, and you should feel good about all three. I have had applicants in the past that have gotten offered their third choice, and we're like, I just put that because had to, right? I've even had candidates that were offered something that wasn't in their top three choices, and they were like, oh, well, I guess they know something I don't. This looks like a great choice, right? And they went with it. So, that doesn't happen very often. And in fact, I think it's only happened once, but do feel good about all the choices you've made there, that you'd be happy going to any one of those three. As you're looking at the Canadian universities, obviously you want to look in your departments or the parallel to your department there. You want to be able to talk about the quality in a specific way of the academic program that you're interested in. What makes this poli-sci department so better than another one? Why is this physics department better than another one? And again, it's not necessarily about rank or reputation, it's about fit. Like to say, well, they do a particular type of research there that isn't done here at ASU, or there's not a lot of opportunity to take Canadian history courses or First Nations people's history courses or things like that. So really be looking at what are the specific reasons that draw you to this department at this university. Look at the faculty members there. There are probably some cool people that you'd love to work with. And so if you can call that out in your application, that would be great. There might be some co-curricular activities, student organizations, external research opportunities, internships, ways for you to get involved outside of the classroom that are unique to this university or this location. And if being involved off of campus as well as an ambassador matters quite a bit too. And so there might be some cultural opportunities at that location that are unique and that you would want to be sure to highlight. So I would encourage you to go to universitystudy.ca. This is a great sort of overview of the Canadian higher education system. You can start digging through and finding programs and universities that align with your interests, right? So, excuse me. As we're thinking about course selection, this part gives students fits quite a bit because it is a little bit of labor, right? And you've got to go and you look at the course catalogs, and more than likely, especially if you're getting started early, they won't have the course offerings for fall 26 or spring 27 up yet. That's fine. We're looking at examples here. So if they offer a course usually in the fall, then you can look back at fall 25 or fall 24 And what we're looking for are courses that you couldn't just take at ASU, right? In some ways, you need to maybe stay on your major map, and I get it. Like you've got to take multivariate calculus to keep going. Cool, that's fine. But if you just basically take your same course that you would have taken here, that's not much of a rationale. So yeah, maybe you need to take a history course, but let's take a Canadian history course, or let's take a comparative political science course, or something like that, or a Canadian literature course. Make it a unique experience by identifying those Canada-centric opportunities. And you need to be able to argue that this is going to help move you towards your career goal and your overall academic goals, right? And that it's just a strong program, right? It's not just fluff. So to look at a couple of examples, Emily is one of our winners for this year, so she'll be in Canada. There's a picture, pretty fresh picture actually, from the fall orientation. Full warning: all Killam fellows are forced to pretend to play ice hockey. And so I don't think that she'd had any previous experience on skates, but at least she got to take a picture in a Killam sweater and with a stick. Um, and so her reasoning for wanting to go to Canada was that she is really interested in ABA therapy. And she had pointed out that Ontario specifically forwards that approach to behavior treatment in their schools. And so she wanted to see that in practice. But she was really interested in Canada's national approach to providing access to mental health for rural underserved populations. She herself had come from a rural location in Iowa that had been widely devastated by an F4 tornado. And she saw firsthand the need that was there. I mean, many of those residents needed follow on care, they needed help. There was none to be had in her small part of Iowa. And even those that could get to larger urban areas couldn't afford it or didn't have access to the right kind of insurance. And so that really motivated her. And so she thought there's got to be a better way. So she started looking at Canada and was really curious about how they approach similar problems, given that they've got some very large rural areas as well. So she chose Carleton University in Ottawa, Ontario, and she was really interested in actually more concrete scientific approaches to the mental health things that she's interested in. There was a researcher there that was doing research on the application of psychedelics in terms of mental health treatment, which is not something that's widely done in the US because of our particular laws, right? So there was a really good argument there. And then she'd also identified some specific examples of ways that she could get involved outside of the classroom, and even pointed out Crossroads Children's Mental Health Center in Ottawa as a place that she would like to volunteer, right? So made a really good case for why Canada. Look at a slightly different example. Maria ended up going to Toronto, and she grew up on the Arizona-Mexico border, and that had always kind of influenced her outlook on things. And again, she wanted a different look. She wanted to reconceptualize what border and immigration policies could look like from a different point of view. And so she thought, let me flip this and look at it from the Canadian perspective as opposed to the US Mexican perspective. And of course, Toronto is a really global university, and so she was really interested in working with their experts in border studies. And she also argued that courses that they had available in Indigenous, feminist, and queer theory courses simply weren't offered at the same scale that they were at Toronto. So underrepresented opportunities there. And then, yeah, she found opportunities to volunteer with some migrant and Indigenous uh, community service organizations as well. And so it's more than just the study, it's also thinking about how do we get engaged, right? Um, Thinking about recommendations, it's not too soon. For many of you, if you're a younger student, a first or second year student, you maybe haven't really gotten this going yet, right? You're not really thought about who can write me strong recommendations. So as we're doing this, and this is one of the things we can talk about in our one-on-one meeting, um, identify somebody who knows you well. And if they don't know you well, get to know them well, right? So schedule some time, go to office hours, have a conversation, excuse me, start building that relationship a little bit so that they will feel committed enough to write a strong letter, right? Somebody that can offer specific examples, right? So small classes, volunteer experiences, jobs where you've worked together, research experiences, right? They need to be able to say, I think that she would work really well in an unstructured environment because I've seen her do the same thing. And here's an example, right? Or, yeah, she's wonderful in class. Let me tell you about this paper she wrote, right? rather than saying, yeah, they were attendance was good and they looked to have a 93 average, right? That's not a helpful recommendation. So ideally, these are people that have taught you in a college course or supervised your research. They are well-established professionals. So letters of recommendation, avoid asking high school teachers. Those might be a little bit dated. If you're a first year student, we could maybe talk that through. It could be a possibility. Obviously, you want to avoid peers. I get people all the time that say, well, I'm a president of this club. I really can't think of anyone to write a letter. Can I get somebody else in the club to write a letter? No, I wouldn't do that. It would not be taken seriously by the readers. Chances are good that this is the first and only letter they've ever written. Wouldn't be great. um, your manager at your part-time job at Sonic or Ulta or something like that. Again, they've probably not written many letters for high stakes international fellowships, so probably would not help that much. But again, happy to talk through that. And don't go after somebody just because they've got a fancy title. Um, I've gotten letters for people like, oh yeah, I interned with Ruben Gallego, and they tried to get a letter from Gallego, and it was just, yep, they were here, they did a good job. We would rather have it from somebody who can offer more concrete examples. I had a question in the chat, which I think is a really good one. Do the faculty members have to be ASU faculty? Absolutely not, right? They do not. So if you had, say, an off-campus a summer research experience at another university or something like that, fine, absolutely. If you're a transfer student, yes, absolutely. Faculty member from another university, study abroad, absolutely. So study abroad supervisors tend to be really good for this because they've seen you in an international context and they've seen you working in groups of students. If you're a Barrett student, human event faculty often are very good choices because they've been with you for an entire semester in a small setting. And I can tell you that our Barrett faculty write really good letters, right? They really put a lot of effort into it because they think it's important, right? And they're slightly afraid of me. I'm kidding, but the personal statement is the keystone of the application, right? This is where you're going to make your argument for this opportunity. And it's a narrative. And so it will explain why you want to study in the United States. Oops, as a Killam fellow. I pulled that from the Canadian instructions. So why you want to study in Canada as a Killam fellow, right? The instructions for the Canadians are exactly the same as ours. They just flip the names of the countries. What you want to accomplish during your exchange. What are your goals for your exchange and how it fits within your current interest and future goals. So kind of where do you come from? What do you want to accomplish in the long term? How does your time in Canada fit that narrative? And then you want to illustrate that with some experiences that demonstrate your ability to adapt, willingness to share or learn from others, and ability to serve as an ambassador. So these are all things that they're looking for is like, would this person get this, right? Would they understand what it means to represent the U.S.? Do they have experience working with people unlike them? Can we trust them? Are they mature, thoughtful, dependable, kind, all these sorts of things? And like I said, I am happy to review as many drafts as you want to share with me. Most of our applicants find that an incredibly valuable part of the process. And I can assure you that if you go all the way through the process, that essay that you send off will be your best possible essay at that point. Um, but you've got to do the writing. I have some resources that we'll get together for you to help get you started. For many of you, this might be your first real personal statement, right? And so this is a wonderful opportunity to get started on this process. So um, if you want to access the ASU specific application instructions, that's available under the Apply tab on our website. I can save you some time, and there's a QR code that'll take you right to the Killam application instructions for ASU. To schedule an appointment, you can do that right through the ASU website as well. If you're having difficulty finding time to meet, scheduling a time with me, let me know. My schedule next week is pretty gobbled up, but it clears up pretty well the week after. But I can squeeze some folks in if you have any trouble finding a good time. So great. I'll leave that slide up there for a moment for those of you that want to grab that link. If you want to get after it later, you can get it under the Apply tab on our website. Let me pause there now that I've given you all the basics. And what kinds of questions do you have? You're welcome to unmute yourself. You're welcome to type them in the chat, whatever your preference is. So Angelica asks, can recommenders be supervisors from internships? Absolutely. Those often make pretty good recommendations. Professional settings, professional situations. I would want to ensure that at least one of our recommendations comes from is an academic reference because that is the primary, focus of this opportunity. But yeah, absolutely. That if they can speak to your responsibility, dependability, professional abilities, things like that. And it is two recommendations, right? Other questions? And one of the things we do provide is a memorandum of guidance that you can provide to the folks who agree to write your letters, and it gives them a bit more context about this opportunity, informs them of the deadlines and the process. They'll actually send their letters directly to us, and we have an email account specifically for that. Any other questions? Well, great. Uh, Unless there's any other questions, your next steps really are to take a look at all this information, take a look at our application process. If you decide that you'd like to investigate further, you can go ahead and schedule an intake meeting with me, and then we'll see where we're at and make some decisions and hopefully get you en route to submitting your application. It's a great program. And if you think of anything you forgot to ask, feel free to reach out. I'm always just an email away. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.